Hello, I'm Clint Walker, and this is Real Estate Appraiser Secrets. And today, we're going to talk about the sometimes sad reality that cost does not equal value. Except sometimes it does. And even sometimes it's better and value exceeds cost. So we're going to talk a little bit about this relationship and how it applies to real estate and how it might help you talking to your sellers. So in the appraiser world, we get asked this question a lot because really at the end of the day, every seller, most sellers, they're really hoping that whatever money they spend on the house translates into a value add to the property. And as I said, the sad reality is that's just often not true. You get sellers who spend money doing things that no one else cares about except for them. That's the value of personal enjoyment that I talked about in the last video. You get sellers spending money on completing maintenance that buyers expect to be done before they are willing to even buy the house. So oftentimes in those regards, you don't get any money back. Although if you didn't do them, you might have to discount the property. So you can look at it in that regard as getting some value back out of it, but it might not. But the sellers, they always wanted to translate to like a premium over every other property, and that's not exactly how that translates. But so you got all those scenarios where you can spend money on the house and it doesn't necessarily translate into value the way that a seller's hoping for. But there are also lots of ways that spending money on a house could translate into value or could translate into extra value. So, like with everything in real estate, it always depends. It always depends on that property and that market at that point in time as to what they're going to be able to get out of it. But you can make improvements to things. You can make improvements to the property that maybe participants in your market absolutely love. For instance, in many rural markets, a steel shop of some kind on the property is clearly very attractive. And these things aren't necessarily all that expensive to build. And when we look at it on the resale, occasionally they seem to bring a big premium. And it sort of makes sense. Rural markets, people have, toys, UTVs, ATVs, extra cars, a truck, bush hogs, things like that. And they need a place to store them. And that shop can be very valuable to them, even though it wasn't very expensive for the person who built it to build. So you can do things like that have a relatively low cost and bring a huge impact. And, we also, historically, you've seen this with like kitchens and bathrooms and the way HGTV talks about those things getting a great return. Even though, if you pay attention, it's usually not 100%. For other reasons. So at the beginning of this, I said that value doesn't equal cost except when it does. So the except when it does part is that sort of fundamentally in real estate and with all things, everything starts at cost. So value starts with cost because somebody has got to put down the money. Somebody's got to put in the energy to do something. And you can, and so there's, that cost, the first person to do it is always going to try to recoup 100% of it if they can. And maybe the next buyer who comes along recognizes that, well, they're asking me to pay them back everything that they spent doing this, and if I don't do that, then I've got to go find the money to do that myself, and then I'm going to have to go hire the contractors and all this stuff. And that thought process and and the anticipation of having to do that themselves and the energy that's going to take, that's how cost starts to translate into value to a buyer. Okay, especially if they do really want whatever that improvement was. So that's when it does. And in appraising, we sort of can recognize that using an adjustment technique or a method of adjusting called the depreciated replacement cost, where we recognize that an improvement should or does contribute value and we want to make an adjustment for that. We can actually use these national cost manuals that start at the cost of doing that, and then we look at the age or the condition of it, and we can apply depreciation to it. We can make an adjustment based on the depreciated replacement cost. So in that regard, that's an example of, even in appraising, even when we might not necessarily be able to put 2 or 3 sales together and say, yeah, here's where buyers are giving value to this shop, just for example, we can say, well, the depreciated replacement cost of this shop is X dollars, and so I'm adding that to the subject and doing it that way. So a lot of times when I get calls from agents and they want to know, well, hey Clint, I've got this property, it's got 10 acres and it's got this really cool shop. How much value can I give to that? Usually my advice to them is, well, I can't tell you how much value to give to it, but my recommendation is, as this seller's agent, ask them how much they spent on it if they built it themselves, and consider the condition of it, and sort of start with what they spent on it, deduct for the wear and tear that it's had over whatever course of time it's been been on the property, and see if adding that to the price of a comp that doesn't have anything makes sense. Because in that way, you're helping your seller recoup what they spent on it, and you're subtracting for the use that they've gotten out of it for whatever period of time they've been using it, and you're accounting for the idea or maybe the assumption that a buyer wants it and would build it themselves. So you're sort of mashing all that together to figure out a value proposition for that one particular item on the property. Still has to make sense in the market, okay? You still need some inkling that buyers want it and will pay for it, but that's one way to do it. And then, so referring back to the beginning of the video, sometimes value is even better than cost. And I already gave you the shop example, but myself and other real estate investors in the market, we build spec houses because the huge benefit of an economy that recognizes market value instead of just cost plus some fixed amount is that through lots of economic principles that are way too in the weeds to explain in the video, you can build something and do something for a cost that is cheaper than what the market recognizes as the value of it, okay? And so that makes doing spec builds possible because, a builder becomes an economy of scale. There's your economic principle that gets in the weed. They can build the house for, X dollars per square foot, and then the market value is X dollars per square foot higher than that. And so now your builder sees that they can make a profit by building. And so they build. We got a whole real estate economy built on that idea that market value does not equal cost. And sometimes that means that market value far exceeds the cost of doing the work. And so it incentivizes people to jump in and build spec houses, to become professional builders and build whole subdivisions, things like that. Because of that relationship between market value and cost. So you can take that and apply that to lots of different things in your in regards to a real estate, piece of real estate. Like I said, the shop, the pool. Right now, pools are after COVID, they got way too expensive to really make money on one, I think. But maybe if you own a pool company, you can still do that. But there are lots of aspects. Lots of things you can do to a property where the market value is separate from the cost proposition, and you can make money on it. So, I don't know, maybe if you've got a seller who's upset about this relationship between cost and market value, you can explain to them that, maybe with whatever they're upset about, it's not going in their favor, but the bigger picture, from a bigger picture view, it's great that the cost is divorced from the market value on these certain things. And you can talk to them about how you can try to recoup that value for them, or talk to them about how maybe you've got some ideas about where they could spend some money and sort of make money on those improvements. Sometimes sometimes you make money on paint, and lots of different things. So I hope that's helpful. I know I get a little rambly because that is it really does get into some complicated principles, but fundamentally, it's not all that hard to understand. And if you detach yourself from any sort of emotional disappointment in cost not equaling value, you can see that it's kind of a benefit that those two things are separate from each other. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. If you've spent some crazy money on something and you're wanting to know if it's added value to the property, you need an appraisal on that, we can certainly help you with that. If you need a professional measurement or a consultation, you can find us at appraiserpool.com and schedule those things. I appreciate you watching as always, and I will catch you next week. Thanks. Bye.